Jay Warren made history last year as being the first Utah artist to ever have their album land #1 on the iTunes R&B charts and racked up close to 3 million Spotify streams last year alone. Welcome, Jay Warren.
Hey
Thank you,
Jay,
Mark.
welcome. Yeah, welcome to the
Hey,
show, man. Welcome to the show.
thank you very much. I appreciate it. Glad to be here. Glad to talk a little bit.
Yeah, we're excited to have you here. We've been following you for a long time, and we've been really impressed with everything you've been doing, and um, just the way you present yourself is fantastic. We really like it a lot. So
Thank you.
we kind of want to go over your story a little bit. How did you get into music?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been singing since I was little. I mean, my mom tells the story of me at like 18 months trying to sing along with Whitney Houston's "I Will Always Love You." Yeah, and so I mean, I don't know that I really became self-aware of like my singing talent, if you will, until probably like second grade is when I kind of figured out like, oh, like maybe I can sing a little bit better than the average person. And I got a solo in our little like school performance. And I was like, oh, well, cool. Well, this feels fun. um, and yeah, so since then I've been involved in like school choirs and church choirs and like middle school band and just music in general. And then in my senior year of high school, I taught myself to play the piano. I started with just chords, and yeah, that's when I started writing my own songs. Was that senior year of high school, and then freshman year of college had a band. Like probably everyone in college at some point had a band. um, yeah, and it was so much fun. Like we recorded an EP and we played shows and like people actually came to them. And um I mean, like looking back, it wasn't necessarily like my genre of music or like what I wouldn't necessarily have continued in that style of music. It was kind of like pop synth, like Vampire Weekend or like Block Party, Matt and Kim kind of. um and even though that genre didn't come naturally to me, the experience was just so fun. And I enjoyed it so much that I was like, okay, this feels like something I could do um, for a career. And then, yeah, then since then, it was just kind of a matter of continuing to figure out who I was musically, who I was personally, and then who I was musically. Um, and now we're here on Zoom on this podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. So have you lived in Utah your whole life then?
No, no. My dad was in the military, and so we moved around quite a bit. So I was born in New Jersey, and then we moved to New York, back to New Jersey, St. Louis, Missouri, San Diego, California, and then that's where I graduated high school. And then I came out to Utah for college.
Oh, cool, cool. Awesome. So you've kind of been around
Yeah,
growing up.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Both coasts, Midwest, and now the Rocky Mountains. Yeah.
So would you say that that inspired music that you've written? You know, you said you started writing music since you were a senior in high school. Would you say that moving around to all those different places had an influence um, on your music style or the way that you feel writing music?
So if I don't necessarily know that it has an effect on the way that I feel when I'm writing music. Um, well, perhaps in some sense it does, just because you tend to write about your lived experiences, and so I suppose in some sense it does. But in my musical style, really, I would say that because I moved around a lot, I never really had a constant in terms of like local geographic sound, right? Like like there's a specific sound to Atlanta, and there's a specific sound to Atlanta or into New York and Nashville and LA, Chicago, wherever it is that you are. Um, and actually even Utah, like especially in the like alternative um realm, there's a sound. And because I moved around a lot, like I was never anywhere long enough to really grapple with that. And so I think my writing style is this conglomerate of everything that I've ever heard, and then whatever was on the radio, because I was a 90s kid. Like,
Oh yeah.
yeah, that seems to kind of be where I draw inspiration from, stylistically at least, is that I tend to write things that would capture the most amount of ears.
Yeah.
I'm not too niche, but I try to be interesting without being, too niche.
Yeah, that makes sense. Were there any that stood above the rest? Did you have any I guess icons growing up?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, so both my parents were from the Caribbean. My dad was born and raised in Jamaica. My mom was born in Trinidad and Tobago, and then grew up in London. And so I'm first generation American. And so growing up until probably like middle school, I only knew three American artists. I knew
Oh wow.
Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, and we had a Kenny G CD. So I
Nice.
knew yeah. And outside of that, it was like reggae, calypso, dancehall, soca, music from the Caribbean. And so it wasn't until middle school that I started kind of venturing out on my own. And I think that's kind of a typical age for most people, that like you kind of start figuring out your own music tastes.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, growing up, like Michael Jackson was a huge influence, because that's, again, like probably, even to this day, probably the American artist that I've listened to the most in my lifetime.
Yeah.
Is likely Michael Jackson. And I drew a lot of inspiration for the album Give Love from the Thriller album. Not necessarily musically, but just I was listening to that album quite a bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, Michael Jackson absolutely stood out. And then as I got older, I really enjoy like The Weeknd, The Weeknd's early stuff and his later stuff. Like overall, I really enjoy The Weeknd. Frank Ocean. Who else would I say? Kanye West. I think he's a brilliant producer.
Oh yeah.
Who else? Yeah, I mean, I have this playlist that is like my top like 35 albums or something like that, and it's quite a long playlist, but yeah, but it's oh whoops, it's like all of the it's like all of the albums that I felt like kind of inspired my music tastes and whatnot. But yeah, those artists I would say are at the top.
Oh, that's fantastic. They're all great artists. That's cool about the Michael Jackson, that you had the three, kind of American artists growing up. That's
Yeah.
that's kind of a unique experience. That's cool. That's fantastic. Well,
Yeah.
in your sound, the R&B sound, you do it so well. Everything. You're very tight. It sounds really good.
Thanks.
So you moved around, and then you got to Utah to go to college. And you played around with a couple bands and everything, and kind of decided to go solo. So how has it been being an independent artist through all this, as opposed to, I mean, do you want to be signed? Do you want to keep going as an independent? What kind of talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there is sometimes I think there's a misnomer about the term independent, because I think when people hear independent artist, the idea that comes to mind is an artist who is doing absolutely every single thing on their own with no help, which technically speaking, in the music term, independent isn't what independent means. Like Webster's dictionary, like, yes, independent means you as the individual doing everything, right? But in the music world, there's major label, right? And then there's independent, which really just means that you could be unsigned, like you could be working 100% on your own, or you could be signed to an independent label, which just means any label that is not a major label, or owned by the big three. So from my very first solo release, Closer, in 2017, I looked at it as, all right, at that point I had like 1,000, maybe like 1,500 followers on Instagram. And I was like, I feel really good about this song. I think it's a great song. I could release it on my own, just through like CD Baby or TuneCore or something like that. And it would go to the 1,000 to 1,500 people that currently follow me. And like, that would kind of be it. I would keep 100% of the streams, but again, it would be like 1,000 streams. So it didn't seem like that was the best way to go about it. And so I had finished the song like early 2017, and the song didn't come out until October. We had shot the music video that summer. And so we had like the assets lined up and done already, but I decided to wait on the release, continue releasing covers, and then like scour the internet for independent record labels that would have more resources than I had on my own to release the song and have a larger debut and, you know, do more with the song than what I could do on my own. So in that research, I found a few tools. One was submithub.com, and it's changed a lot since 2017, but essentially its function hasn't changed. But it's a website where you can submit your music to independent labels, blogs, and media platforms, SoundCloud playlists, Spotify independent playlists, Instagram influencers, and you can submit your music to them for review, for them to either sign you or write about it or use your music. And they have to reply back to you within 24 hours or you get your money back.
Wow.
So I found SubmitHub in my search for independent labels, and on SubmitHub I found a record label called Bonfire Records, who they were out in Massachusetts. And the guy that started Bonfire had previously worked for Spotify. And keep in mind, this is before like you could submit music for playlisting on the Spotify for Artists app. So this is before that app existed. And so he knew the Spotify editors, and like they had their own, just like, it was literally just like a Google form that Spotify was using that you would submit to. And I was like, okay, well, it makes more sense to me to try and get this onto a playlist and get it in front of Spotify editors and give up a percentage of the shares for that contract was for 3 years. And so, yeah, so that's what I did. So since 2017, I've always worked either with an independent label or a distributor in a distribution deal, and we can go over that later at some point, but if you'd like to. So I've always worked with a team in order to maximize the amount of eyes and ears on the music, because I think too often, like, musicians, like, we work so hard on the music and don't think about, okay, well, now how do I get it in front of the most people possible? That's not true. We think about that, but we depend too much on ourselves to do that.
Yeah.
There are other people who it's their job and their expertise on how to do that. So that was a very long-winded answer, but
no, that's great. I think you're totally right.
Yeah.
No, that's fantastic. I actually wasn't even aware of that site that you were talking about, but I think that's very smart. You know, you don't want to, most businesses, most companies, most anything, organizations in the world can't just be a one person operation. You know, you need people in different skill sets, and especially as an artist, art is it's so time consuming to create, you know, the songs and everything. I think that's a great point.
And I think most musicians or artists in general, like, there's the typical creative personality type, which is, it has its pros and its cons, and the pros being that you are creative and that typically you are like, you're an open person, you're high in openness, and that you are kind of outgoing and X, Y, and Z. and you have an ability to feel other people's emotions and X, Y, and Z. But on some of the con sides, it's like musicians aren't great at execution or at organization or yeah, and certainly not thinking like a marketer. And so you want to have someone or something that can do those things for you. Otherwise, you could be the greatest guitarist in the world and just sitting in your garage and no one's going to hear it.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. Is that so? Would you say that that whole chain of things then, getting your sound heard through more people by giving a portion of your percentage away, would you say that that contributed greatly to where you're at now? Do you think that that was, in hindsight, that you're grateful you did that essentially?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because my first that release Closer, it landed on New Music Friday, Germany, New Music Friday, Italy, New
Wow.
Music Friday, Turkey, and Switzerland or Sweden. I always get those two confused, but yeah, but it's one of the Scandinavian countries. Yeah. So yeah, and then my following release, Fall Asleep with You, landed on New Music Friday, Italy, and another one. But yeah, like Closer in its, because you know how songs come out earlier in other parts of the world because of the time difference and whatnot. So by the time the song came out in the US, like midnight US time, it already had 20,000 streams because
Wow.
it was on New Music Friday, Germany, and all those other countries. So yeah, that, and then because of that, it was on like German radio airplay, and yeah, like the a rep for Universal, an A&R for Universal that was in Germany, like reached out the day that the song released, and yeah,
Wow.
that absolutely helped. Like I would almost say 100%, but well, I guess the song's pretty good, but
Yeah.
yeah, it was extremely helpful. It was extremely helpful. Yes.
That's fantastic. I think that's great advice. I think that that's a great insight into getting your song heard more, because you're absolutely right. You can be the best in the world, but if you're just in your garage, or you just play at home all day type of thing, it doesn't really matter as far as getting out there goes. So I
Yeah.
think that's great. I think it's fantastic. So you yeah, clearly you've seen some success with this. I mean, that's very obvious. You had the top R&B album on iTunes. Is that right?
Yeah. It was I mean, that was a big goal that we set and really just like detailed a plan for. I mean, my team is, we're quite a small team. It's me, my manager, my lawyer, and then my executive producer. And yeah, we set the goal, and then I'm very big on set goals, make plans. Like
Yeah.
if you're not, and I think this way even for just life in general, like I think so many people, especially in our day and age, suffer from depression, anxiety. A percentage of that is because there are, like chemical misfirings in the brain, and there are neurological things going on there. But I think that a very good percentage of that is just that so many people do not have a goal or a
Yeah.
direction that they're going, and so they're just in this huge ocean of life, floating around with this anxiety of kind of impending doom, because well, they're not headed anywhere. There's no direction. And so I
Yeah.
think that you can transfer that, or use that goal setting ability in music as well, or any career, that if you're just releasing music to release music, then it's, I don't know, it's kind of pointless. But if you have a direction, if you have like a goal, like something measurable, something tangible that you can say, like, I've either succeeded at, or I haven't, then you at least, your plans kind of start to make themselves. So I purposely waited about, it was like 3 years before we released like a debut album, because I wanted to release an album once I had a large enough fan base to do something significant with it, so that
Yeah.
there would be press about it and people would write about it and things like that. So yeah, we waited until 2020 to release an album, and for us the goal was going #1 on iTunes R&B album chart, because it's a small enough chart that it was realistic, but it's a large enough chart that it's impressive, and
Meant
people will
something.
write about it. People will care about it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we set that goal at the probably at the beginning of the year, and then started. What did we do? Oh, well, so there's a small music hack here. We uploaded a fake version of the album that was just like scratch tracks, like not the
Wow.
finished versions, because the album wasn't finished. So we uploaded that in like June or July, and so that we could start collecting pre-orders, even though the album wasn't finished yet. And then as the songs were done, we swapped out the WAV files for the actual songs.
Wow.
So yeah, so we had the entire summer through September to gather pre-orders, because I was like, if I wait until the album's done, like it's just not going to be enough time to get the amount of pre-orders that we're going to need. So yeah, we did that. We uploaded a fake version of the album, and then, which I have come to find out that like, I'm pretty sure that's what most major labels are doing. Like if you look at, obviously iTunes is is a dying storefront. Like no one buys albums on iTunes anymore. But yeah, like if you go to iTunes and then go to the upcoming albums list, like there are albums that the release date is like a year from now, but you can pre-order the album now. And it's like that, I was looking at that and I was like, oh, like that's how they do this. Like that's how they go #1. Like they put the album up for pre-order even though the album's not done, and then once they see, because you can see on the back end like how many pre-orders you have, once they see, all right, we've got X number of pre-orders, we're confident that like we can go #1 with this, then they release the album. And so yeah, it's much more of a business game than it is necessarily just make the best music possible. But anyway, I'm sorry, I go on these tangents. And like I can't.
I like it. Keep going, man. It's great.
Yeah. So yeah, we set the goal and then kind of noticed that that's how the major labels do it, and so we decided to do that. And then originally the album was set to release on September 19th, but the week before, Alicia Keys announced that she was going to release her album on September 19th. And I was like immediately on the phone with my team, like, what in the world are we going to do? Like, this is terrible. Like, we've been doing all of this work. And then, I mean, Alicia Keys, who is an all-time great on R&B and in general, is like, all right, cool. I'm releasing my album on September 19th. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. So publicly we said that like we still had changes to make to the album, and so we were pushing it back a week. But internally the reason was like, I'm not going to try to go head to head with Alicia Keys. Like this just isn't going to work. And I was like, I've put in too much work to come in second at this point. So
I agree.
Yeah. So we pushed the album back a week to the 26th in the hopes that maybe after a week, like her sales will have slowed down enough for us to hit #1, which ended up working, and we hit #1 on release day on the 26th. So yeah, that's kind of that's the story of going #1 with the album.
Man, that's awesome. That's great insight. I didn't know all of that stuff about the back end. That's very interesting, actually. That's extremely interesting. Was that around the time that Lionel Richie, you said on your Instagram bio that Lionel Richie had you on his story? Talk a little bit about that. Is that related?
So the so all of that happened after we released the album. So we released it on the 26th in late September. And one of the songs on the album is a cover of Lionel Richie's debut single, Truly. And like, I love his version of the song. And I was like, I would love to sing this song. I mean, we like raised the keys so that I could go into my falsetto. We made it a little faster. So it's a little bit more of a jam instead of a ballad. And I put out an Instagram post after the album came out, just asking people to tag Lionel Richie because I just wanted him to see the song. And yeah, so like we put out the post, a bunch of people were tagging him, and then a few hours later, I got an email from his manager saying that like, hey, we've seen the tags, and I'll make sure Lionel hears the song. And I mean, and for me, that was kind of like the win. I was like, dude, that's crazy. Like, that's so awesome. And in the email, he was like, no promises on, you know, if he'll like share or anything like that, but like, I'll make sure that he hears the song. And then it was like later that night, I got another email saying that like, hey, Lionel's heard the song. He loves it. Make sure you're following like all his social media accounts because he's probably going to share it. And then I think it was like 2 or 3 days later. Yeah, he shared the album and my version of his song on his story, which was friggin' cool. Yeah,
That's insane, man.
it was really cool. Yeah,
That's Lionel Richie. He's like,
for real. For
he's a
real.
legend, man. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Man.
absolutely.
That is so cool.
It was really cool.
That's really cool. So what do you have planned then coming up? Do you have any new releases coming up? Any tours if life gets back to normal?
Oh gosh, man. Oh, tours. That is a headache and a half thinking about tour with the current state of everything. But
yeah.
So we definitely have plans for what the tour would look like. Obviously, in terms of when that's going to happen and in what capacity that will be able to happen, we don't know yet. But yeah, we definitely have an idea of what our show will look like. And then in terms of releases and whatnot, I'm writing a whole lot more. Really what we've been working on primarily though is we've just finished our like investment deck. And so we're pitching to private investors because I'm very big on spending other people's money as opposed to spending your own. Like it just works better that way.
Totally.
So we've just finished our investment deck and we're starting our rounds of pitching right now to private investors to bring on some more capital because I think we've kind of exhausted our resources in terms of what we can do with like a small budget, and we're ready for more money. And I think we've done a pretty good job of proving what we can do with little to no budget. So
absolutely.
Yeah, so I think, and I mean, I think that's another thing that artists tend to shy away from just because it's kind of in our nature, our personalities, is that we don't love talking about money or negotiating, which is a form of confrontation. I think artists tend to shy away from that, even though it is an absolutely necessary part of the business.
Totally.
I mean, yeah, so I mean, we're trying to, I hate this term because I feel like it's so cliche, but we're trying to disrupt the music industry in kind of creating deals that look very different from your typical like label deal. And then if all of our projections kind of line up or work out to some degree, at least, then we'll take a look at, all right, is it time to start pitching to majors, or is this working so well that, you know, let's stay independent, or, you know, we'll see from there. But yeah, I mean, that's what we're working on.
That's fantastic. I love that, actually. I think you're exactly right. You know, the musicians do kind of like to shy away from anything that looks corporate in a way, you know, anything that looks like it's going to take away the pure image of the art. But if you want to go full, you know, if you want to go full capacity with what you can achieve, business is very, very necessary. You know, so
yeah, absolutely.
I love that.
Like it kind of blows my mind that And I mean, I would say this even like at the risk of being canceled, so to speak. Like, I am 100% team capitalism. Like,
Yeah.
it, and I think that like major label, like huge artists and stars that kind of tout this idea that like, you know, you need to stay true to the art and capitalism is this bad thing and X, Y, and Z. It's like capitalism literally got you where you are. Like, you have millions of dollars because of capitalism and because of your marketing team and your label's ability to capitalize on your art form. Like, that is why you have any sphere, you're in any sphere of influence to be able to say the things that you're saying. And so I think it's just incredibly naive to think that you should divorce the art from the business, because without the business there is no art. Like, you don't have the funds or the resources to be able to create any of that art. And that's as old as Beethoven and Mozart. Like, they had patrons that paid for their livelihood in order to create that art. Michelangelo, like the Sistine Chapel, like someone had to pay for that to get done, had to pay for his lifestyle so that he could take as much time as he needed to paint the Sistine Chapel, which we're all grateful for that he did. But
exactly.
But yeah, if you're not thinking about how can I pay for this, without me having to go into debt, and what value can I provide to somebody else who could potentially pay for it, then I don't know that you're in a winning position for the long term, at least.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, you know, using somebody else's money, there are people that dedicate their lives to finding good investments, and they know the risk. You know, I mean, it's their job. It's pretty much what they do.
Absolutely.
And so they know that, you know, they actually have a formula. There's, you know, the whole investment formula of success rates and everything. And but it's a great point, because they want people who are showing potential for success to approach them to say, hey, we can both make money here. You know, you can help me out, I can help you out. Let's work together. So I love that you brought that up. I think that's a great point.
Yeah. And by no means am I saying like sell out in terms of, okay, well, now I need to write music for the masses.
Oh, can you hear me? I think we lost you here. Or,
I will give it a sec.
what's up?
We'll give it a sec.
Was it just me? Oh,
No,
okay.
yeah, he's frozen on mine.
Oh, okay. Yeah, our Wi-Fi should be good, right? Yeah, we can see each other. So I wonder,
Yeah, we're
you know,
good.
I'm gonna use this time to switch my headphones real fast because this one's dying.
Go for it. Oop, he's gone. Let's see if he comes back.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I really like talking to him.
That's been great so far.
Yeah.
Let's bring it to the Utah scene and then his family next, and just kind of start wrapping it up. It's been over a half hour, so.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I just like talking to him, honestly. He's fascinating to talk to. The story's great. I mean, he has great ideas, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
I think he's looking at it very intellectually, and that's exactly how you need to look at it as a musician.
Exactly.
You know?
It's a good change for sure.
Mm-hmm. That's funny. I don't know if you know this, but so I have this water bottle. I use water bottles because I so often forget to refill my water, but I keep it in a glass just in case anybody has a problem with water bottles. Man, I wish that we had more. Oh, sweet. Hey, there you are.
Geez, sorry about that.
You're good, man.
Yeah, my phone was, it's like connected to the like the heater vent thing in the car,
Oh,
and then it was like, phone is overheating. I was like, oh god, I'm an idiot. So I turned the car off.
that's
Yeah.
awesome. Oh,
But what I was saying was that by no means am I saying that you have to sell out in that, like, well, now I need to write music for the masses and I can't write what I want to write anymore. No, like, you've made it to the point where someone is willing to invest money in you because you have written what you've wanted to write and because people are taking well to that. And so by no means is that like, well, now, yeah, now you're going to create art that you don't want to create. It's just, no,
yeah.
create what you want and now do it at a bigger scale.
Yeah, no, I like that too, because definitely there are enough people who are just kind of churning out the formula type of thing. I think that art to progress, I think you're exactly right. You need to focus on your lane and just maximize your lane, as much as you can.
Mm-hmm.
I totally agree with you. I think that's fantastic. And in your experience with the Utah music scene, how have you seen that music scene compare, I guess, against some of the other scenes that you lived in? And I know those were at different stages of your life, so maybe
Sure.
you know, but how do you see that as differing?
So as far as I can tell, and I say this, so I've taken major label meetings in LA and in New York. So I've met with Republic Records in New York, met with Warner Brothers in LA, or Elektra Records in LA. And from what I can tell, Utah is just chock full of talent. Like, there are
Yeah,
brilliant musicians, singers, songwriters, producers. Like, there's no shortage of creative talent here in Utah. Where there is a shortage is, I see it as capital or funding, and then the infrastructure to facilitate the music business. So while there are a ton of creative artists or creatives in general, there aren't a ton of managers or publicists or entertainment lawyers or labels, independent labels. Like, those
yeah,
don't necessarily exist here. And I can't quite put my finger on what it would take in order for those to exist here. Because to me, it kind of seems something like artists are driven by the music and the creativity and certainly the money. I think anyone that says I'm not in it for the money is lying, or just
yeah,
doesn't have a serious sense of reality.
yeah,
But then the people on the business side of music are 100% in it for the money.
yeah,
And I don't know that artists in Utah have yet figured that out, like grappled with the idea that in order for more labels or managers and lawyers to be here in Utah, that the artists themselves have to be making money, because
yeah,
those people only make money if the artist makes money, right? And so yeah, I guess it would take more artists realizing that they have to do everything they can to generate revenue, because if you're making money, people will just come to you. Like,
yeah,
that's just how it works, right? You don't have to go looking for people. If you are making
yeah,
money and people know that, they'll come to you. So yeah, I think it would just be figuring out, all right, well, how do we educate and finance artists so that they can create revenue, and then once they're creating revenue, let's make sure everyone knows about that, so that
yeah,
those other pieces of the music come here. But I mean, on the music side, I think Salt Lake, Provo, Ogden, they're like perfectly on par with any other city in terms of music ability. I really compare it to kind of like a Seattle or like Chicago sized scene, if you will.
yeah.
But yeah, there's no shortage of creativity in Utah, and no shortage of collaboration, I think. I think other cities are a little bit more cutthroat in terms of, I'm not working with so and so because we're competition and blah 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 blah. And I think Salt Lake does a pretty good job of collaborating with other artists and creatives and things like that.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. How do you view the venues in Utah? Do you think there are enough of them for enough of the different genres of musicians here, or?
I think so. I have an interesting take on venues. Certainly because like post COVID, but also even before COVID, my thoughts on venues kind of started to change because speaking to Utah specifically, something that is difficult, especially in Utah County, is that most venues outside of Utah depend on their two ways of making money: ticket sales and alcohol sales. And that is how venues support themselves. Like that's the product that they have to give. And in Utah County specifically, majority of people who are going to shows at venues don't drink. And so the venues don't have that piece of income. And so it's a lot more difficult for like an independent or a smaller venue to even just like survive. Or it's easier for a smaller venue, but it's very difficult for a large venue to survive in Utah County because they just don't, you don't sell alcohol there. So it's not gonna sustain itself, which is why I don't think you see venues like the State Room, like something the size of the State Room or the Depot or what's in the venue, is that, or a complex. Like you don't see venues, you don't see venues of that size in Utah County just because you can't sell alcohol there. And while I'm certainly not saying Utah County needs to change their values and everyone needs to start drinking, that's not what I'm saying. It's just that culturally there is that barrier to get over in terms of how do you create a venue that can still generate revenue while offering a ticket price that is reasonable. Because if you're not making money in alcohol, then you need to raise the price of your ticket sales. But if your tickets are too expensive, then people aren't going to come. So that's difficult. I don't know the answer to that. But outside of that, like I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. Sorry, I was getting a phone call. It'll be interesting to see what venues kind of plans are after COVID, like after things open up, because it seems to me like so many of the artists that kind of blew up during quarantine, like I've been calling this like the TikTok era of music. So many of those artists, like their fan base is on the internet and not localized to any specific city. And so many of them only have one, maybe two songs that people know. And also, like so many of them, people know their song, but not necessarily the artist. Like we've all heard the songs and like we've like, oh yeah, that's that song from TikTok, but we have no idea like who it is, like who the artist is. And so I'm interested to see like what role venues play in those artists' trajectory. Like do those artists end up going on tour, or are they just kind of something that we all were like really into while we were stuck inside? I don't know. That'll be interesting. But yeah, I mean, I think there will always be a place for venues. I just don't know what that will look like. I'm really interested to see what that'll look like after COVID.
Yeah, well, because there's kind of the two lines of thought with that, I guess. You have the whole, the pendulum's been held back up to this level for so long, and maybe people are going to be so desperate to see live music that everybody can just profit. Or on the flip side, like you're saying, it's kind of the TikTok era. I like how you said that, where people are getting used to seeing everything from their phones. Everything's now kind of like what you can stream. And so, yeah, I agree that is an interesting take. That's will
And
be.
I think there will now always be, like, I have a hard time seeing the world divorce themselves from Zoom or
Yeah.
like Skype, FaceTime, and anything like this, because like I feel like artists will go on tour and people will just kind of expect there to be the ability to like watch it via Zoom or something like that. And I mean, people will expect to pay for that, I think, but
Yeah.
um so I wonder how that will affect like in-person ticket sales. Like, will less people go because they have the ability to watch it at home? Um, yeah, I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't. It's
Yeah.
it's interesting. It's curious.
Time will tell, I guess, right?
Yeah, literally.
well, so you've been doing all of this. You've, like we've mentioned several times before, you've clearly hit very big milestones, and it's actually really exciting to see.
Thank
But
you.
how has that been with a family? Have you found it more difficult with the family, or is it totally manageable?
No, it's certainly more difficult. Yeah, I mean, I won't shy away from that. Like, it's definitely more difficult because when like when I was single and before I had kids, like 24 hours of your day is just dedicated to you. Like,
Yeah.
you're the only person that you have to worry about. Maybe calling home to your parents every once in a while, but like all hours of the day are dedicated to you and whatever it is that you want to do. And so you certainly just have a lot more time. And then when you get married, to a degree, still like majority of your time is still for yourself. Like, your your spouse is not dependent on you for like life.
Yeah.
And so you still have majority of your time that you can spend on you. But certainly, like, once you have kids, I would almost go as far to say that, like, maybe not majority of your time, but majority of your energy is certainly spent on other people. Like, you are no longer your own, because now there are people that literally depend on you for life.
Yeah.
Like, they just don't survive without you being there and being attentive to their needs. So it is more difficult. But that being said, I think that's part of the journey of life, is that like we only grow and become better by adopting as much responsibility as we can healthily take on, and then figuring out how the hell to function in that.
Yeah.
Like, it
I
and
totally
so
agree.
it takes like a level of planning and a level of dedication to those plans. And like, no longer can you just wake up and say, all right, well, like, what am I going to do today? Maybe I'll write some songs, maybe I'll do this, blah blah blah. Like, no, like, you need to have planned that like the night or week before, because you can't just kind of wake up willy-nilly when you've got a
Yeah.
4-year-old and a 1-year-old that are like, Dad, I need chocolate milk and I need my diaper changed. Like, no, man, you need to have plans, and you need to adopt responsibility, and get yourself together to a point where you can share the art that you need to share with the world.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes sense. Have you been writing from home then, like the majority of your time, or do you go to a studio or write with somebody else?
So I tend to write at home. Like, we're in a 3-bedroom, and so we have our room, the boys' room, and then a home office slash studio. So like, one half of it is my wife's office, and the other half is my office studio thing. And
Oh, cool.
yeah, I have enough of a setup to where like I can certainly like write from home and record like demos from home. Um, and then if like when it's time to record like final vocals, we go to the studio. But yeah, I have a setup to where I can do that at home. I am learning that there seems to be something like psychologically beneficial to leaving your house, though.
Yeah.
When it's like going to work, um because, and I don't know necessarily exactly what it is, but it seems something like when you leave your house, like, your house can stay like home, and like, this is where I'm living and having fun and sleeping, and like, you can keep those activities to this geographic place. And then when you go somewhere else, you can kind of make that mental switch of like, all right, now it's work mode.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's interesting. It's doable, and you can certainly be successful at it. But I would say it's more difficult to have everything at home, because it kind of blurs the lines on like, well, when am I working and when am I being with my family? And because it's just all in the same place. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't, yeah, it's just interesting. Like, it's an interesting problem to solve, but I mean, it's a good problem to have, as opposed to like not being healthy, or not having a job or something like that. But yeah.
Yeah, well, and I like that you brought that up, because I know that some of the reason that musicians in the past have chosen nicknames for themselves is that same sort of psychological reason, so that they
Mhm.
can have, so Bono, his real name is Paul. He's Paul with his family, but he's Bono to the world, and that way he can kind of distinguish. And I think you're right. It's just this is a geographical, spot. It's a physical location that you're moving to, rather than kind of a mental space, but it's affecting your mentality all the same. So I think that's a great insight. Do you find when you do work from home that it's more distracting to be kind of in that familiar environment, harder to be creative, or is it more hard to come back to being a dad, kind of thing, like a family man type of thing?
Right. I
Um,
mean, it's both, I think, because again, because those lines are a bit blurred, like, because it's all happening in the same space, like, as I'll make it really tangible for you. So there
yeah,
will be times where, like, if I'm writing or working on music, and like my wife is with the kids and they're doing something, and like if I hear that maybe Winston is like throwing a tantrum and the baby's crying at the same time, like my inclination is to get up from what I'm doing and like go help, because
yeah,
like I can hear the kids crying. So it's like
yeah,
I should get up and go help, right?
yeah,
um, and whereas obviously if I were away, like at an office or a studio or elsewhere, like I wouldn't even hear that and I wouldn't know. And so I would just continue to stay locked into what I'm doing. Um, and so you do have to kind of figure out like, and I think that requires like communication between me and my spouse on like, okay, well, when that is happening, like, do you want me to get up and help, or like should I keep working? Like, what is it? What works for us?
yeah,
And then at the same time, on the opposite end, it's like when I'm with the family and our kids and whatnot, and maybe like an email or a text comes in and it has to do with like music or the business side of things, like it's more difficult to just put that down and be like, okay, well, I'll get to that when I'm at the office or at the studio or
yeah,
something, because you're always at the office, like, because it's there with you. So yeah, it's in short, like it's just difficult to figure that out, and it takes a lot of self-discipline. I'm not perfect at it by any means, and um I mean, the world has only been doing this for like a year, so I don't
right.
think any of us necessarily are. And
Totally.
um, yeah, so yeah, it's difficult, but it just requires a lot of communication and self-discipline, and we're all figuring that out.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, hey, thanks for your time, man. We appreciate you coming on. It's been great talking to you. I love your insights.
Thanks.
And really, we're really excited to see where you keep going, and let us know if there's anything we can do to help you. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm a firm believer in the whole, we all help each other and we all win together type of thing. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I
Was
so
it rising tides lift all ships or something like that? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and we're firm believers in that. So let us know. We're happy to help. Um, and yeah, we'd love to stay in touch. We'd love to do this again in the future and kind of get an update then, and love to get your feedback on the closed beta. That would all be fantastic. But thanks again for your time, Bowie. Do you have any other questions you can think of for this time?
Yeah, for our listeners, where can they find you on social media?
Yeah, so all of my handles are the same, at JYWRRN, which is just Jay Warren without the vowels. Um, because it was available. So I went with that. Yeah, so Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, the website is that as well, jywrrn.com. And then, yeah, just Jay Warren on Spotify, YouTube, wherever you illegally download music from. It's all there. Yeah.
All there.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, hey, thanks again, man. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll stay in touch.
Appreciate it, guys. Have a good one. Thank you.
Hey, you too. Take care.